All right, so last week we started talking about this idea of balancing family and friendly. And it's kind of a topical thing, really not the kind of way I usually like to approach things. But I'm going to reiterate what I said last week, which is it's very important that if you miss a week, you have to understand everything is going to kind of be one big picture. So each week, the sermon in itself will have a certain measure of completeness to it, but really it's meant to fit into the bigger picture of what we're going to discuss the next 2 weeks. So last week we talked about biblical family. We talked about the values, the good things about family and the bad things about family. So this week we're going to move to the idea of friendly. And I'm going to start by saying something. The reality is I think most families are a little less friendly and welcoming than they think they are. I don't mean that we're not friendly and we're not welcoming, but I think most families are a little less friendly and welcoming than they think that they are. I think we want to think that we're cool or groovy, everybody wants to hang out with us. But we have a lot of inside jokes. We have a lot of things going on that are kind of family type things that are taking place. And so a lot of times we're exclusive because of the way we act. And we are that way both with our genetic family and with our church family. Because of what that common bond of relationship is, that in itself tends to create a certain measure of exclusion. Because if you don't share in that common bond, then you're naturally excluded to a certain degree. So one of the things that we do with our close friends is we give them the honorary family title. And all families have the honorary family title. Families have Uncle Bob, who isn't related to anyone. He's just always around, so the kids call him Uncle Bob. Do we not have those in our lives? We have them, correct? I am an uncle of children I am not related to. All of us have certain honorary titles. So we give them that title, so they're kind of allowed into that inner circle of our lives. They're going to be not allowed into the deep, deep circle, but they're allowed into that sort of outer circle of what our family is. And so as we kind of move through this morning and get to understanding what that inner circle is, the idea of being friendly, we're going to take a look at Romans 12. Paul says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. This part of Romans 12 we've talked about recently as we were going through our foundational series on one of the foundational aspects of Christianity is humility. That Christians should have a certain measure of humbleness that comes from our understanding of what Jesus did for us and our understanding of what we cannot in turn do for ourselves. And because of grace, all Christians should be humble. Christians shouldn't be arrogant. We should never be arrogant in our faith. And we talked about this. But then Paul kind of finishes all this when he talks about practicing hospitality. Hospitality is an interesting word. It's defined as generous and friendly treatment of visitors and guests. Hospitable treatment, or the activity of providing food, drinks for people who are guests or customers of an organization. The primary definition of hospitality is generous and friendly treatment of visitors and guests. For most of us, we would agree that we should always be friendly to guests. We shake their hands. We pat them on the shoulder. We say, how you doing? We treat them well. But a lot of us would not then associate the term generous when it comes to hospitable. But hospitable is defined with the word generous, so I don't normally apply it that way. But generousness in itself is an interesting concept. Generousness is this idea that we go above and beyond that which is expected, is how we define generous. Is that we go above and beyond that which is expected or beyond expectation. So if we say we gave a generous gift, we would have to have a baseline understanding of what is acceptable. If someone says you are a generous tipper, which are my favorite people from my years in the restaurant business, I believe in generous tippers. Christians are not. The worst day to work is lunch on Sunday. Everybody knows it, and it's not just the Baptists. Everybody who loves Jesus Christ and believes he died on their cross for their sins are then the most stingy tippers on earth. And they'll run you to death for like 2 bits, which I think is 50 cents.
Or a track.
Or a track, right, exactly. Give them the $1 million track. Servers love that. If you think this tip is generous, know what Jesus did. I don't know. Honestly, at least 100 servers I saw come to Jesus because of those. So keep doing it. The idea that if we say someone is a generous tipper, why would we say that unless we have an understanding of what is acceptable? An acceptable tip is what? 10, 15%. 15% is an acceptable tip. All right? So if we say someone's generous, they have to go above and beyond that which is understood to be acceptable. So Christmas is coming. We've started to see the commercials. They've already started. They started rolling out big time a couple weeks ago. The Christmas commercials have begun. And Christmas in itself is a season where we go through what we believe to be acceptable expressions of appreciation. When it comes to our Christmas gifts, we have a level. When we go shopping, we begin to build our pyramid, our acceptable pyramid of gift giving. So we go through, first of all, what is an acceptable gift from someone who loves me? We would say what? A nice t-shirt or sweatshirt of your favorite sports team. That would be a good, that's acceptable. If someone loves you, they're going to give you that. They'll give you a picture maybe of your kids, a nice collage of the family. Those are acceptable gifts where we get them, we go, thank you very much, that's amazing. But then we start to think of what goes above and beyond acceptable. A generous gift would be a Lexus or a Ferrari. We would say, well, that's above and beyond what is an acceptable level of gift giving to me to express how much you love me. We have an acceptableness. And then back in the back of our minds, of course, we have to go through the process of what? Dealing with that which we believe falls short of acceptable expression of how much you love me. And we begin to prepare our thank you. That's nice. We really appreciate it. This is great. I needed one of these. That's like the death phrase on Christmas, right? Someone opens up a gift from you and they go, oh, that's great, I needed one of these. You know what that means, right? They have like 3 of them in the garage. Huh? That's what that means? It's exactly what it means. All right. So that's what we do. Hey, look, ties and socks are acceptable gifts, but they're certainly never going to be misconstrued as generous, right? What a generous gift this tie is. No one's ever seen. So we have this idea, in order to understand generous, we have to define acceptable. We have to understand what is acceptable. Acts 16 tells the story. It says, one of those listening was a woman. Her name was Lydia. Lydia was a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart in response to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. We've talked at length about the understanding of the pronouns in the book of Acts. So whenever you see us and we, it means Luke was there, right? Luke was present as to what was going on. So here's this person she just met, and she is so thankful for the message of Christ that he bestowed upon her, that she wants to express her appreciation and give the greatest gift she can, which is hospitality. She wants to give them a place to stay. And I love how the Bible says, but they had to be persuaded. She persuaded us. They didn't just say, fantastic, great, wonderful. They had to be persuaded. Why? Because hospitality is great, but you have to be willing to accept it at times as well, and not just assume that you're a bother. When someone says, hey, we really want you to come over for dinner, a lot of times we have this understanding that, oh, well, we don't want to be a bother, so we're not going to do that. Or we don't want to, take advantage of your hospitality, your generousness, so we don't want to do that. But the reality is we're robbing people of an opportunity to be hospitable. And Paul says to be hospitable. And as we're going to read later, Peter says to be hospitable. And so we have to give people the opportunity to be hospitable toward us, which means to treat us in a friendly and generous nature. And so it's the same thing when someone invites you into their home for a meal or out for a meal. One of my favorite moments at the end of every meal, especially when I'm out with my lovely wife and others, is when the check comes. Because my wife has bruised my leg under the table on more than one occasion. to tell me I should be paying for it. She gets mad at me when I don't pay for it. But the reality is, I hate the American check dance anyway. My whole thing is, if you say you got it, I'm going to say, okay, cool. If you don't got it, then don't say you got it. Then be like, it's your turn. I can accept that. My thing is I understand I don't like the check dance anyway, and sometimes I have to accept that that's your desire to be hospitable with me, and so I in turn say, well, if I'm accepting of your hospitality, then later on when it's my turn to pay, you'll be accepting of my hospitality. I don't want someone to tell me no 54 times before I know they're going to tell me yes if I keep insisting. I don't want to have to be like, do one of those, ninja grabs when the server puts the check down. It shouldn't be that way. It should just be, I got you, I'll take care of it, no problem. That's hospitality. Sometimes we have to allow others that opportunity to give us a gift. Luke 10 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work for myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, Jesus said, you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. I want to include this rather quickly this morning, this story, because as we get into things the next couple of weeks, this idea is going to become more a part of our understanding of friendly. But sometimes hospitality is as simple as needed fellowship, as a chance to sort of sit at someone's feet and give them the attention they need, to give them the opportunity to share what's going on in their lives, to give them the opportunity to talk. Martha wanted to entertain. And one of the things we're going to talk about over the next few weeks is there's a massive difference between entertaining in America and being hospitable. A huge difference between entertaining and being hospitable. And we're going to get back to that. Basically, Jesus is saying, I wanted to talk and to share and to build relationship and to fellowship and tell you more about the truth of my Father, to tell you more about how much my Father loves you, to tell you more about the things that are going on. I want to share these things. And so he's endorsing Mary's offering of hospitality instead of Martha's desire to entertain. Jesus is saying, I love this opportunity to talk and to fellowship and build relationship. I don't need you to entertain me. That's not what I need. That's not what fellowship is. Hospitality is offering our best sometimes. And in the case of Mary, it's just as simple as offering her attention. 1 Peter says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So now we've seen Jesus talking about the value of hospitality. We've talked about Paul talking about the value of hospitality and mandating the act itself. And here Peter's doing the same. And he starts it by saying, love covers a multitude of sins. Love each other. And that makes me think of with our kids. They mess us up sometimes. They make mistakes. They do things that are very tough to love them through, but we do it anyway. I know my parents probably have a huge list of all of the things that I did wrong. They could sit down and write volumes of my errors. But their love for me covered all of that. Their love for me went beyond all of that. They loved me in spite of those things. It overcame those things. And one of the things I will tell you is that my parents never lamented the lows with me as with the same passion they celebrated the highs. My parents never got so stuck in the lows that they were unable to celebrate the highs. And that's how when we love, because their love for me is deep. It covered a multitude of my sins. And so now we've been reminded about that baseline understanding of love, because Paul explains it the same way before he mentions be hospitable. So Peter says we must offer hospitality to one another, but he adds a little caveat to the end of the discussion. He says without grumbling. So the reality is, if you're annoyed, is it hospitality? If you're grumbling, is it friendliness? Because you're not being generous and friendly in your treatment of them by gnashing your teeth in the back when you're frustrated by how they're acting in your home. because you feel you have to do it. Is that hospitality? Is treating someone well the same thing as do they have to think they're being treated well to be treated well? No, because we treat people well all the time, but then we talk behind their back. So it doesn't matter what they know. If we're treating them poorly, whether it be behind their back or in their face, they are being treated poorly. We have to be careful how we act, because it becomes a legalistic relationship when you're only being hospitable because you have to. The longer I work in the football league that I'm in, the more I know I don't have very many friends. I have a whole lot of people that will tell me what I want to hear to get what they want out of me every Saturday and Monday and Tuesday and Thursday. But very little of it is friendship. Very little of it is hospitality. They are doing so with an intended goal in mind. They are treating me well to get my ear. They are going out of the way, but then as soon as I turn around, they slide into the recesses of the crowd, and they're the first people calling me names when the game is over. That's the reality of my relationship with most of the people I work with. I know it, so it doesn't bother me as much. I smile when they're trying to be super friendly, when I know they're just trying to get something out of me. But that's how that relationship works, because they're only being hospitable to gain an advantage. And that's really the definition of being fake. And this is the definition, fake, of being, this is kind of how we define church friendly for a little bit too long, I think. Often our desired interaction with people is merely a goal toward what our desired achievement is. And a desired achievement is for people to like our church, to want to come to our church and stay. So we're going to treat them really well at the door. We're going to shake their hand. We're going to go out of our way to be super friendly once they get in the building, because we want them to stay, so we can fill more seats, and we can someday have our own sign.
Amen.
It's a dream that I know all of you share with me, and to someday have our own daycare. But that's what our goal is. Is it hospitality? Is it acceptable hospitality? Yeah. Is it generous? No. So it's this idea of when you walk into a church for the first time, ushers always greet you at the door with a flourish, right? They're shaking hands, they're grabbing shoulders, fist bumping, forearm bumping, if you're in Oakland, whatever. Everybody's going through this certain measure of passion and desire. And then they always point you to the coffee station, right? Because that is the transition of hospitality, is to the fooded area. Even if it's just a little snack or sugar packet. There's something we want to get them to. So we shake their hand, but then we tell them, oh, hey, over here we have coffee because we need coffee. And then there's always those couple of people which will say hello. They'll go out of their way to say hello. And that's about it. And then depending on the size of the church, the pastor might talk to you, might not. If it's a smaller church like ours, of course I'll talk to you. But a bigger church, then you get the designated talker leader guy. Those guys are awesome. Someday we'll be big enough to have one of those as well. But this idea of we get the designated talker guy who goes around and gets to know people. And then you always have the one person in a small church who feels that sort of heavy burden to run around and make sure they're not the reason someone doesn't come back. And they will make sure that every new person through the door gets to know their names. And this has kind of become the acceptable level of friendly in every church. But the question is it really hospitality or is it really fake? Fake is defined as not true or real, no stunner there, meant to look real or genuine, but not real or genuine. It's meant to look real. It's meant to look real. And that might sound obvious, but think about it. It's meant to look. The goal is to look real when something's fake. You ever, worry about that when it comes to church? That are we meant to look real? Are we really hospitable? Or are we just meant to look real? Have you ever been fooled by one of those kit cars? You know what I'm talking about? I know Drew and I are definitely on the same page there. But you know what I'm talking about with those kit cars? You ever been fooled by one of those from a distance? You're like, and right, you'll actually walk across the parking lot to see the kit car. And then you get closer and closer, and you're like, wait a minute. Then you walk right up, and boy, I'll tell you, the shell looks real, but under the hood, it's a Kia. You know, nothing against Kias, John. They're just one level above Snapper when it comes to horsepower. You know, but the idea is you know that disappointment you feel when you get close? You're like, yeah. And it's just kind of like, just doesn't really do anything for you. And you get close and you discover it's a complete forgery. You know, and you were so excited, but now when you find out it's fake, you're kind of bummed. Well, I think sometimes that, like those kit cars and churches have a lot in common. You know, I think perhaps there are more kit churches than there are actually authentic ones. And what I mean by that is that there's more churches looking real than are actually real. And a little caveat here real quick. I'm going to be careful how I say this, because I have a certain way I'd like to say it, but I'm going to say it nicely. Caveat over here. I'm going to step aside really quickly. I'm going to step off camera. Okay. Being authentic is important. But if you're authentically a jerk, you need to change. Does that make sense? Authentic is a very nice thing. But if you're authentically a jerk, it's time to change who you are. You don't get to tell me I'm just being real. Yeah, but you're a real jerk. Okay? So please change. I hate this concept that we have in this country now where I just gotta be who I am. But if who you are sucks, then change. You understand? Okay, and the next one. So getting back to this idea of kit churches. I think too many churches only appear to be a real thing. And then once people kind of get close, they're finding out they're fake. The minute they approach and they get just right there, they realize it's an imitation of the real thing. It's not the real thing. And I think people can smell out inauthentic hospitality much quicker than we give them credit for. Much quicker than we think. And so what separates those churches then? What separates the kit churches? The ones that are generously friendly from the ones who are merely acceptably friendly? Or what separates the authentic representation of Christ in one church from the authentic representation of a successful church in the other church? Because you see it all the time in Christendom, right? Well, what's working over there? Well, they've got a fantastic coffee ministry. Well then, we should really up our game. What? Because what are we? We become an authentic representation of a successful church. That is the definition of kit car. It is an authentic representation of a Lamborghini. It's not a Lamborghini. Nothing against Kia. It's not a Lamborghini. It just looks like it. No offense, but I'd rather have a real one. And I would never drive a kit version of it. So getting back to hospitality, we've quoted so many passages today about the need for the presence of hospitality in the church. So why is it discussed so much biblically? Because it's essential. Yes? It's essential. And because it's something that for most of us, we have to learn. We have to learn to be hospitable. When I was growing up, I heard the phrase all the time, the gift of hospitality. Do you know if you take spiritual gifts tests, it's on there. Even though it's not a spiritual gift. But it's on there. You know what is a spiritual gift as listed by the apostles? Administration. Because that is a gift. Because either you're good at it or you're not. You can't learn it. I tried. You can't. Either you're organized and you dig that stuff, or you're not. Not me. Don't have that gift. But the gift of hospitality is not a gift. It's not. Do I believe that certain people are more adept at it? Sure. but it's not a gift. And we're all told to practice this idea of the gift of hospitality within the church. In America, it's merely the American inability to separate the ability to put on a party and entertain with the biblical mandate to care for others and treat them generously. In our country, we call the gift of hospitality in our super groovy churches throughout the South, it's the gift of hospitality. Well, that's not really, they're talking about what? Women who put on really good parties. Everybody come on over, we're having a wine tasting, I've got 75 different trays of hors d'oeuvres. That's just something I threw together. No, it's not. And a lot of times in this country, the gift of entertaining is way more about appeasing the ego of the entertainer than really treating the people who are being entertained well. And most of you probably just thought of Cam on Modern Family. And that's fair. But it's about appeasing the ego of the entertainer more so than ever treating those who are being, cared for generously. The word hospitality and hospital come from the same root word because they are the same thing. They are both places that are there to care more about those who enter than those who are there doing the caring. If someone walks into a hospital in grave need, they ask, what's wrong? What can we do? What's happening here? What's going on? They don't go, hey, that doesn't look good. But let's go show you the cafeteria. They don't go, hey, I see the bone has exited the skin, but before we go any further, we probably should walk you through our daycare area and our coffee station. They actually care about the person walking in for the most part. It's not quite as, I know Matt and Fiona live the life of ER and Chicago Hope and, what's the girly one? Oh, they all are. Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, Grey's Anatomy, thank you. With Sir Hunk-a-Lot or whatever that dude. All I know is he was in Can't Buy Me Love, and I have no respect for him. But the idea is that they're there to care for those who enter, and those who enter, they are given care immediately. It's not this, they don't feel they have to sell the hospital. If you're in a car accident and you're not doing well, they're not going, well, are you sure you want this hospital? Let us show you what this hospital has to do. There's lots of cool things going on. We have a slide. We have a lot of great things. We have over here, we have a great tech department. Every room has a flat screen TV. It's all of these great things. No, they're going, okay, we need to probably get you cared for before we worry about that other stuff. But that's the same root word that has given us both the words hospitable and hospital. So we have to understand that we are about caring generously for those who come in. A church has to become far more authentically hospitable in order to balance the concepts of friendly and family. We have to crave relationships with those who enter our church and our lives. We have to see every moment as a chance to be generous in both our friendly and generous treatment of others. And often it's simply just giving them a longer ear than they normally would get from anyone else. Or it's giving them a meal or a roof or clothing. Hospitality is not the divine ability to entertain. It is the love passed from our Savior who died on the cross for us to bring grace and mercy into our lives, than that we are willing to die and care for those around us in order to pass on grace and mercy to them. It's the chain of love's evidence in the life of the proclaimed follower of Christ. The ability to entertain is a gift, but one that is more about appeasing the ego than ever caring for the people who need to be cared for. When the church isn't practicing genuine godly hospitality, but rather exchanging it for some churchy process of indoctrinating newcomers into their method, the church is really about feeding their own ego with success stories of growth, rather than meeting the needs of those who enter by feeding into their lives the message of Christ through love. When we become more about our process and celebrating our process than we are about actually caring about the people, we have completely lost sight of who the church is supposed to be in the world. And this goes an even step further, and I was really thinking about this a lot this morning. hospitality is an attitude. And it is extended not only to those who come in or those in our lives, but also to Jesus in our life. A lot of times our treatment of Christ is not generous and friendly. When Jesus becomes the divine vending machine of our circumstance, we miss the point. When we start to blame Jesus every time something doesn't go right, and I know a lot of us have had some bad times in our lives, and all of a sudden we're just, Jesus, why'd you let this happen to me? You know, that's why I love Andy Stanley when he said, he didn't. You set it up, and it was going to end that way no matter what. The thing is that we have to be hospitable in the same way we are welcoming to Jesus in our church as well. Same way we are welcoming to Jesus in our worship. Same way we are welcoming to Jesus in our sermons, in our classes, in our time together as family. The same way that we are welcoming to Christ in the different events of our lives. And that Jesus always has a place in our life, a generous place in our lives where we are constantly being generous with Christ. When was the last time we were really generous with our time? When it came to Jesus. When was the last time we really took time from something else and gave it to Christ? Something that we always give our time to something else, something important to us, and we took it away and we said, you know what, I'm going to take that time away from over here, and I'm going to give it to Jesus this week. I'm not going to give it to television. I'm not going to give it to the radio. I'm not going to give it to other things I've got going on, maybe my pet projects or my hobbies. I'm going to pull time away, and I'm going to give that time to Jesus. That's hospitality. And in our church services, if we're not being hospitable to Christ, then we're basically telling him, you know what, Jesus, we would rather totally fake it with you because we know we can fool you. I'm here, aren't I? And Jesus is like, yes, and I'm so glad that you showed up all faked out like that. But if we're not being generous, if we're not being authentic with Christ, then there is no place for authentic worship in the church. There's no place for authentically receiving the message that Jesus has for us every week. There's no real authentic expression of Christ in our lives to those around us. So when we're running into people and we're like, I don't know why I keep trying to tell them about Jesus, but it's like how much of authentically the Christ living in you, how much authentically of that is pouring into the people around you? How much of that is really, they're seeing that? Or are they just hearing words out of your mouth but seeing something else? The act of attending church is not authentic Christianity. So to tell somebody at the office, well, you know, I go to church, I'm a Christian, that's not authentic Christianity. Any more so than shaking a hand and pointing somebody to the coffee station is authentic hospitality. And so for all of us, we've got to remember that we have to be as hospitable to Christ in our lives, which means as generous with our time, as generous with everything we have, our giftings, everything, we've got to give it back. You know? How many times have people come into the church over the years and we say, I wonder why they never came back? Don't we all have those moments? I really like them. Wonder why they never came back. Anybody ever know? Am I the only person who ever says that? I say it all the time. Wonder why they never came back. We say that all the time. Wonder why they never came back. But you know something we never say was, man, we took them out to lunch afterwards. We went to a barbecue, and they totally came back. We don't say that one very often, right? I mean, I don't. Maybe you guys do. Maybe you guys have a lot of barbecues I've never invited. That's cool. I'm not hurt at all. A little. A lot. I have spite. But how many times do we ever say that? When someone says, why did they come back? You ever ask anybody that? I don't know why those people ever came back. That was like the worst service ever last week. Why'd they come back? Well, they came back because there was a genuinely hospitable relationship they built with somebody. There was a time, opportunity, relationship they built with somebody. This year of one, it's important that we understand we have to be hospitable to them. We have to allow them in, give them more time, give them more than we normally would. Go out of our way because we need to take this seriously. And we're already a couple months into it, you know, and I'm not going to let this die. And I'm going to keep bringing it up every week as a goal of what our church is, so that, you know, come next May, you're either going to be feeling really guilty and awful or very successful. That's the only two options here, right? You guys know that. I'm not letting this one go. Every week you're going to hear about this. So either you get to go, I totally forgot, right? I had it on my calendar and it's May. I mean, those are the only two options. Because in this year of one, it's another good thing to be able to do, because The more you spend time with people, the more we take them out to lunch, the more we take them out to dinner, the more you build a relationship with them, the more we're hospitable with them, the more we're generous toward them. Then when we talk to them about the generousness of Jesus Christ, it's not such a stretch, because that generousness of Jesus is seen through us. So let's pray. Father, we just thank you so much for this morning. And God, we just pray for this week. God, as the Thanksgiving season approaches, we just pray for for organization and the franticness of these seasons. God, I just pray that we can have a great few months of ministry throughout this family season to really reach out to those around us. So God, I thank you for this group of people. God, I just pray that we can passionately seek out to fulfill your mission here on earth. And God, may we, I put myself in the front line, may we learn to, in all things, be hospitable, to give people 25 minutes when they need 5, to take people to lunch when all they want is something to do things above and beyond, to show your generousness, because you have shown us so much. In your name, amen. All right.